Hey there, hi there, ho there, Rob Gutierrez. Welcome back to the musical journey, Sentimental Elephants. We're taking a trip through the alphabet, letter by letter, artist by artist, and just telling a little bit about my personal journey, my experience with each of these particular artists, what they mean to me, and how they've affected my life. We are at M. My oh my. M stands for midway point, which is where we're at. We're midway through the alphabet. Now, once we get to the end of the alphabet, I do kind of hope to revisit. You know, I'm not going to just end this with 25/26 artists, but it's where we're starting with, and we're at M. We missed a week. Well, we missed a year a bit before that, but been trying to keep things clock steady, so just took a little bit of time off on that one. This is quite probably going to be a bit of a long one, so settle in. M. So there's a lot of artists that start with M. In my own particular lexicon, Sarah McLachlan. Sarah McLachlan smiled at me once. I'm certain she did. This is the artist I've probably seen, not local artist, that I've seen the most amount of time, Sarah McLachlan, except for, she's second. The first is the band that we'll be talking with in the main text. But starting Sarah McLachlan, Mountain, great band. More than just the one song. Most people just know Mississippi Queen, which also starts with M. But they got a lot of other great songs. Mountain, Sweet Joni Mitchell, obviously, legend, Sweet Joni. The Moody Blues, Mott the Hoople, huge favorite band of mine. They're more than just all the young dudes. They've got a lot of other songs, but besides that, Bob Mould from Husker Du, incredible musician and songwriter, guitar player. Van Morrison, another legend, and keeping on the legend, Paul McCartney. Moist, great Canadian band. My Morning Jacket, John McLaughlin and Mahavishnu Orchestra's band as a fusion pioneer, and just great musician in a variety of different styles. Lorena McKennitt, who's seems to be in some quarters of the Ottawa/Ontario/pagan Canadian pagan community, seems to be viewed as the only artist anybody ever listens to. But she's still a lot of fine music came from her. Mumford & Sons, who I just saw this past summer, was one of the greatest concerts I've ever seen. My Bloody Valentine, Kirsty MacColl, R.I.P., wonderful singer-songwriter, lost her way too young. Go check out her stuff. She's something special. Mazzy Star is one of those bands that I was into before other people were. Haha. Sorry, yes, I can be a bit of a music snob sometimes. Metallica, the mighty Metallica. Alanis Morissette, I saw her live last summer. That was an incredible show. Ottawa, I'm from Ottawa, and so she's Ottawa native. Mojave 3, who were a great band that spun off from another of my favorite bands, which is Slowdive. Mansun, which were didn't really make much of an impact here in North America, with this awesome British band from the mid 90s. Madness, legendary band, much more than just One Step Beyond and Our House. There's a number of the bands that I'm mentioning here that are say they're more than just one or two songs. Well, I think most bands are, but Murder Inc., which is a spin-off band from Killing Joke. What else do we have here? Dave Matthews Band, who are, I enjoy Dave Matthews Band. I saw them live a number of years ago. I'm not as fanatical about them as some people, but just a lot of great music came from them. A lot of great live recordings. Amy Mann, former lead singer of Till Tuesday. Again, I can say I was into her solo stuff before other people were. It's like I was a big fan of actually the third. We're talking about Amy Mann rather than Till Tuesday, but I was a big fan of their third album, which nobody seemed to listen to but me. And then I listened to her solo albums, and then Magnolia Soundtrack came out, and she got a bit more attention. But truly a wonderful artist, and also Modest Mouse, who have several of my favorite, great band, but also several of my favorite album titles, including We Were Dead Before the Ship Even Sank and Good News for People Who Like Bad News. But primarily for this subject, and we're however long in, 5 minutes into this, we're now getting to the actual artist that will be featured in this video. M is for Marillion. Possibly one of the least cool bands in the world, and holding on to my head, make me pick just one band. They're my favorite. They are the band that I've seen live the most. I've seen them in 12 different shows. Been a fan of theirs for close to 40 years. So this is like probably about 36, 37 years. Wasn't quite in at the very start, but yeah, I love this band. They're great. Probably the first neo-progressive rock band that I was into. I generally, as I said, I think I might have mentioned before, I kind of resist the neo-progressive. I like classic progressive, but resisted neo-progressive for a while. But Marillion were kind of the exception. I didn't really think of them as that way. Let's see here. This is going to be a little bit different. Usually I'll tell the band, briefly go over the band's history, and then from there I, talk about my own personal journey. But I was in, if not at the very start, but from this perspective, kind of the start of the band, or at least the band as they're known, around the same time. It was just a few years after their first album that I got into them. So I'm going to be kind of telling those two stories in tandem, or parallel, rather. Kind of, they're sort of intertwined. Just a little bit of the background. They're formed in London in the late 70s / early 80s. And there was, originally the name of the band was Silmarillion, after the, part of the Middle-earth saga from J.R.R. Tolkien. Changed the name of the band to Marillion just because it's worrying about legal issues, copyright infringement, etc. There's a few different lineups, or rather a few different shifts in lineup before they got to their first singles and their first album. But the lineup as it came on the first album, Script for a Jester's Tear, was lead singer Fish, real name Derek William Dick, who's a Scottish singer and singer and lyricist. Fish on lead vocals, Steve Rothery on lead guitar, Mark Kelly on keyboards, Peter Trewavis on bass guitar and backing vocals, and the original drummer on the first album was Mick Pointer. I want to point out him because a bit after the first album came out, between the first album and the second album being Fugazi, Mick Pointer was basically kicked out of the band, and there were a few different shifts in drummer in between those two albums. I believe it was Andy Ward from Camel was there for a little, from the group Camel. He was drummer for a little bit. Jonathan Mover, an American drummer, he was also drummer for a while. He would later be the drummer for the group GTR, which was a band that contained Steve Hackett from Genesis and Steve Howe from Yes on guitar. He would also be drummer for Steve Hackett for a while afterwards, I believe. But Steve Hackett's drummer at the time, Ian Mosley, would ultimately be the permanent replacement for Mick Pointer, the permanent drummer. He's still the drummer with the band now. Much of that band is still in place from that lineup. Now, this is a band that didn't maybe at that time get a lot of airplay, but at this point, I'm in my teens, my kind of early heading towards mid-teens. I'm really getting the music bug. and I'm just kind of spending a lot of time, frankly, loitering around record stores. Didn't have money. I was a teenager, but when I did, I would try and get something. And then when I wasn't, I was spending a lot of time looking through the racks, and there was a lot of material from Marillion there, not just records. It was vinyl, primarily vinyl dominated industry at the time, but a lot of things like T-shirts, posters. There's a lot of T-shirt posters, a lot of Marillion posters in the at the record store that I was at, and even jigsaw puzzles of album covers and EP covers. It's kind of neat. So I was aware that there's this band called Marillion out there, and they had an interesting sort of visual look. I'm just going to raise this one again. You can see there's a definitely kind of old school progressive rock look to that, and very quite distinctive. So I was aware. I wasn't sure how their name was pronounced. I think for a little bit I was kept pronouncing it as Marion, because I'm Marillion. I was like, okay, was it Marion? It's like Carrion, but no, it's Marillion. And I was intrigued. I didn't know what they were about, but now the sound, as it turned out to be, and I'm just going to go back to the history, at a time when progressive rock certainly wasn't cool. I don't know if it ever was properly cool. It certainly wasn't in the 1980s, but they were kind of calling back to that. The buzz on them, and I didn't quite get this until later, was that this is a band that really sounds like early Genesis. This Peter Gabriel era Genesis. There was an early track that they did called Grendel, and there's a section of it which is extremely reminiscent of Apocalypse in 9/8, which is part of the Supper's Ready suite by Genesis on the Foxtrot album. It's really kind of wearing it on the sleeve. A lot of this came from Fish, their lead singer. He had a lot, very real character, a lot, very dramatic performances. He would wear face paint like Peter Gabriel would do at different points in his career, particularly with Genesis. A lot of costumes, very Gabriel-esque sound to his voice. Although he did say, and I think I remember reading somewhere he'd said in an interview that another strong influence on him was Peter Hamill. Peter Hamill, who's was the lead singer of the group Vandergraaf Generator. I didn't know that. I didn't get into Vandergraaf Generator until much later, and it was I think right in my early 30s that I discovered them. And when I did discover them, I said, oh yeah, okay, I can hear some of Peter Hamill influence in some early Fish vocals, and that probably or possibly might be one of the reasons why back when I was married, I primarily listened to Steve Hogarth era of Marillion rather than Fish era of Marillion, because my now ex-wife hated Peter Hamill. She was not a fan of his voice, so probably that I would shy away from a singer who's somewhat influenced by him. But great singer was Fish. Developed more of his own. There was early influence, a lot earlier than people I think give him credit for. And also go so far as to say in the first album, after the first EP with Market Square Heroes and Grendel, but when you get to the first album, he's starting to move a little bit further away of quite the strong Peter Gabriel influence. Not quite as much of a Genesis influence, but you can still hear it there. Very moving lyricist. I'll touch on some of that. As I said, there was the early EPs and the first two albums came out, and that's how I was kind of aware of them. I think I seem to recall catching a little bit of a clip of one of their songs. Might have been Assassing or Punch and Judy, one of the songs from Fugazi, which was their second album. Just a little bit, but I'm not carrying it. I was like, I was on a little bit of a video on one of the music programs. That might have been the New Music or something like that. I said, oh, I was intrigued, but I didn't know that. It was still hard to hear. I didn't, as a kid, I was a teenager. I didn't have like money. Like I say, I didn't have money to spare to just go out and get this and find this out. If it's not being played on the radio, it's hard to get to. But there was a guy on a soccer team. I was on a soccer team. I played soccer very poorly, but I was on some soccer teams in my youth, and was a guy in there by the name of Rob Nemi, and I remember that he was the first person I knew. He was a Marillion fan, and there was one time I was his parents were driving us to a game or a practice or whatever, so he put on the music and it was some Marillion, and I was, oh, okay, I'm liking the sound of this. Like at the time, actually, I was a little. I was still listening. I was still listening to progressive rock. I was a bit more into my, for want of a better term, classic rock phase, or I sort of went there. I was still kind of discovering a bit of some new to me bands, like Jethro Tull weren't in the first wave of bands I was getting into. I was kind of getting into a little bit more there. But at this point, I was a bit more focusing on Led Zeppelin and The Who and Deep Purple and so forth. But I was still definitely intrigued by this band. And then the album Misplaced Childhood came out, and that was one where, strangely enough, they actually managed a couple of hit singles, and these got some play on the local radio station, Kaylee and Lavender, and they're very beautiful songs, very moving ones, kind of sad, broken-hearted love songs that. I think anybody could enjoy. It may be a little bit of a the Trojan horse to kind of work Marillion into people's consciousness, and just to get into into the more complicated things. But that got a fair amount of airplay, and I loved those songs. And there was also I don't think might have been the King Biscuit Flower Hour, or one of the weekend shows where they would play concerts from bands on the radio. But I did record part of one, which was when Marillion was performing a section from the Misplaced Childhood album, because the album was sort of one consecutive suite. It was like one song led into another, like Dark Side of the Moon or a lot of other great progressive rock albums. And this is what you did back in the days, folks. I taped it on cassette and I played it over and over again. I really liked that. And at some point, I was able to get the Misplaced Childhood album, which is, it's a wonderful album. It's considered. I think some people might consider it the first Marillion masterpiece. If you're a big fan, it's one of the things that got me about it is just this deep. Emotional songs, which you can get a real quick, strong personal connection to. A lot of progressive rock lyrics, and as I've said before, I'm a very big progressive rock fan. They can tend towards the abstract. That doesn't mean there's no emotion to it, but you kind of maybe sort of got to go through a couple of twists and turns to get there. But a lot of Marillion music, both early and later era, have very strong personal, kind of emotional. You can get a real strong direct, line right to those songs. Even if you go back to their first album, Script from a Jester's Tear, there's a lot of moving songs on it. The title track is just this heartbreaking song, and so Script from a Jester's Tear. It sounds really pretentious, but it's actually, I feel like it's somebody who's watching the woman that they love marry somebody else, and it really works its way into my heart and moves me. It makes me think of Peter Hamill's song called "Lost and Found," where he has this really heavy, chilling lyric of "I'll see you at the wedding. I'll see you on the other side," and it makes me think of that. I didn't hear that one until later, but when Fish on Script for a Jester's Tear is saying, "I will hold my peace forever while you wear the bridal, when you take the bridal vow, and I'm like, wow, it's like, he's just pouring his heart out into this song. I strongly recommend checking that one out. But Misplaced Childhood has a lot of moving material in that in the Fish era. The next one after that was Clutching at Straws, which, as I said, that Misplaced Childhood was probably considered maybe their masterpiece. This may well be my favorite. It's kind of a concept album about a writer, and it deals with issues of addiction, and kind of bordering on issues with depression, which go figure I can really relate to. It hits a very strong emotional chord. There's a song called Torch Song. The lyric, getting late in the game to show any pride or shame. And I kind of like, yeah, I could relate to that lyric. It's around this time I wind up getting to the point I've backed and filled, and I've kind of gotten most of their previous albums, so I can, I'm now like a full-on fan. I can listen to their work. It's at this point in their history the big change happens, which is that Fish ends up leaving the band. Their lead singer, they lose their lead singer, very charismatic, big part of the personality of the band, and that's going to be a devastating blow to any group. A lot, I've seen it. I think it's like in the Wikipedia article, and probably some other articles will say, oh yeah, there's two eras. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, but that is an easy break to make between Fish, the original lead singer, and the new lead singer, the new guy for over 30 years, Steve Hogarth, who's still their lead singer. But that is, obviously that's a big change that has to be acknowledged. So he leaves, and I was like, I've become a fan, but all of a sudden, okay, there's this big shift. Are they going to continue? What's it going to be like? Me being me, I want the band to succeed. I want to continue loving this band. So I was like, okay, please let this be still good. They brought in a new lead singer named Steve Hogarth, who had previously been in a band called the Europeans. He played a session keyboard on the album. Was Infected by the he played that demonic piano solo in the middle of the song Heartland. I didn't realize that until much later. As the story goes, he'd had an offer to go on the road on the versus the World tour, backing the album Mind Bomb, but Marillion had gotten an audition tape from him and was interested in him having be a lead singer. And as Steve Hogarth put it, I turned down a chance to tour. I turned down a chance to tour with the coolest band in the world to become the lead singer of the least cool band in the world. But he comes in, and I'm like, okay, what's it like? Can it be good? And the first thing I saw was on Much Music, back when they played music. And there was like a little bit of an interview with him and Steve Rothery, the lead guitar player, and then they played the new single. And the new single for that album was called Hooks in You. And it kind of helped that it sounded a bit like Incommunicado, which was a single from the previous album, Clutching at Straws. But I'm hearing it, okay, this is a good song. It does sound like a good up-tempo Marillion song. The vocals come in. All right, he's a good singer. He's a really good singer. So, okay, I'm hopeful. And then the first album of the Steve Hogarth era comes out, which is Season's End. And it was a really, really good album. It's a good way to start off the new era. It felt like it was a spiritual continuation of the band, but with a new voice. Steve Hogarth definitely does not sound like Fish, but he's a strong singer in his own way. They both have beautiful voices. They're both very charismatic. They both write incredible lyrics. It's at this point I got to see them live for the first time, and also for the second time. I sometimes think, oh yeah, that was my first. Went from 19 turning to 20, and legal age to go to club shows is 19, but it was a bit later for me. I didn't really go right away. I like sometimes think, oh yeah, that was my first club show. And I was like, it actually wasn't. My first show at a club at a bar was the Australian electronic band called Severed Heads, and their opening band was MC 900 Foot Jesus with DJ Zero, which was a cool show. But Marillion was the second and third. They played 2 nights at Barrymore's, which used to be the main sort of club, music hall in Ottawa. It's kind of gathering dust now, which is a real shame. I later found out that Marillion had played a few months before an earlier show then, and this is where they were coming back. They did 2 more shows. I didn't know about the first one, but this was my first chance to see them live, as far as I knew. I won't go through the whole story. I'll just say this: I went through a lot to get to go to see that show, but it was completely worth it. It was an amazing pair of shows. They played a lot of old material since they only had one album with Steve Hogarth, but hugely exciting show. He sang the old material incredibly. The new songs were wonderful. So I was like, I came out of that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm with this band for life. Let's see here. Yeah. Very high energy show, incredible charisma from the whole band, particularly Steve Hogarth. So I knew the band was in good hands. I'm a big Steve Hogarth fan. If I have to choose between the two, I would say I'm a bit more of a Steve Hogarth era fan than Fish era, but they're both incredible. I just think I like how they continue to evolve musically. And it took on some new dimensions. I'm not saying it wouldn't have happened if Fish was still in the band. I'm just saying that's where it took place. So after, I think a couple of years after that was the next album, which was Holidays in Eden. My understanding is that there was a fair amount of pressure from the record company at that time to come out with more hit singles. They were wanted being kind of pushed to be a commercial success and to regain the sort of commercial heights that they did with Fish, with Misplaced Childhood. It does kind of come out. It took me a bit longer to get into that particular album. I did. I gave it a lot of listens, and there's some good songs on it, but it's not quite as full-blooded for me as some of their other albums. That said, it opens up with a track called Splintering Heart, which is one of my absolute favorite Marillion songs. It always gets me. It just jackhammers me right in here whenever it comes on. There's a lyric towards the end, which is, and there's a burning and freezing and a cross for a kiss. So she learns to stop dreaming, and you know how it is. And that lyric continues to just shake me deep inside, and that really really resonates with me. Dealing with a lot of things about dealing with emotions, keeping them inside, but feeling kind of the weight of them bearing down on me, and there's a lot of that in that song. So even though it's not the strongest album, there's some very good material in it. It's the next album that's their next masterpiece, which is Brave. It's another, like Misplaced Childhood, it's another full album suite. It's a concept album about a news story they read about this woman who was discovered on a bridge, and she had no memory of who she was, and it's kind of trying to picture what her life was like, what sort of led to her being there. It's again a very emotional album. It's a lot of passion, a lot of sadness to it. It's some of the absolute best material, some of the best music they ever made. If I'm like, okay, what, if I want to sort of steer people in the direction of a Marillion album, it's like, this is one, if you want to listen to an album all the way through and get an idea of what this band is about, listen to Brave. The next album, Afraid of Sunlight, it's a very strong follow up. There's a lot of great songs on it, but this is the point where things are not panning out for them commercially. And the record label was starting to lose interest, and that was the last one they did on EMI, the last one they did on a big major label. The band, they got dropped. Next few years, a little bit different. They're on a smaller label called Castle. They didn't have the promotional power behind them that EMI was able to provide, for things like for videos, just getting their music out there, being able to tour. So, and things on my side as well were changing a bit. Just that was my late 20s, and I started focusing on other things. There's a lot of new bands coming to me in the 1990s, discovering whole new genres of music. Marillion's actually probably one of the sort of older bands I sort of kept the thread of listening to probably the longest. But things are changing. The first album on Castle, This Strange Engine, which was a very good album. That's where things started taking a little, even though things weren't working out for Marillion, that's when they started exploring some new things, drawing on the power of their fan base, drawing on the internet. One thing that they did was they said, we don't have the money to fund a North American tour, so sorry, we can't make any stops. And the North American fans said sort of, well, what if we all donated and gathered some money, and with that, if we put together some money, would that be able to help the band, tour in North America so we get to see them live? I was like, okay, if you want to do that. And Mark Kelly, their keyboard player, I think donated some money up front at the beginning. It's like, yeah, I'll sort of seed the pot at the beginning. And the North American fans collected enough money that Marillion was able to use that as a tour float to go and tour, do a bit of a North American tour so the American fans could see them. And this is an early example, and we'll kind of get to it, of crowdfunding before that was ever a thing. And they were able to use that to get some live music to some fans that wouldn't have otherwise been able to see them. The next couple of albums after this strange album, after This Strange Engine, were Radiation and Marillion.com. And they were good albums. I don't say they were great albums, but there's some nice material on them. But as I say, I don't think they consider it their strongest work. And I kind of got them, and I listened to them, and I kind of put them aside. It wasn't really an area of focus for me. Like I said, my tastes were just kind of going in different directions. I hadn't quite figured out how it would be with me, whereas like, yeah, I listen to things in its time. There'll come a time I'll be listening to a lot of a particular artist quite a bit, and then I'm not going to listen to them for a while. I might not listen to them for a couple of years, but then when that comes around, I'll be, later, it's like all of a sudden this artist that I'd been neglecting for a while, now it's the time for me to listen to them again. That was kind of the way with Marillion. I was like, okay, maybe I'm just not as much into this band. Also, other changes in my life. That's where I got married, and I experienced. I moved out. I was living with my wife, and I went through what I call the great pilferage, where my then wife, right at the start of our marriage, wanted to help out her former roommate. So he was living in another room in our place for a while. And he then proceeded to steal a huge amount of my CDs and electronic equipment and pawn it for direct money. So I lost a lot of things, including a number of Marillion albums. And bit after he was gone from the house, that's when I lost the job that I'd had at the time. So I've lost a lot of music, and I'm like kind of, it's like, okay, look, I gotta dig in to just make rent, and I wasn't able to sort of replace it. So it was a while. It's like, okay, Marillion weren't on my radar at all. then they came out with the album Anoractophobia a bit after that, a few years in. And after a little bit, I actually was able to pick up that album. It was in the discount section of a bookstore. Actually, it was a Chapters bookstore. And I said, "Oh, yeah, it's there," and I managed to have a little cash, so I picked it up. But actually, it sat in its plastic wrapper, and I didn't listen to it for quite some time afterwards. Like, okay, I've got it. I'll get to this one of these days. Anoractophobia was when they went to a different part of their sort of crowdfunding experiment. Whereas like they did that, for one tour, and that was started by the fans. It's like, well, maybe we can we'll try this deliberately. The band so thought, we'll try this deliberately and say, hey, you know what? We'll if fans want to donate, to the fund by sort of pre-ordering like a special edition of the next album, the money from the pre-ordering would go into the recording of the album. So they'd have a bigger budget to record and really make the music they wanted to. And this wound up being a success, at least in the fan base. I mean, the album wasn't a commercial breakthrough, but when at some point, like I say, I was like, oh, okay, I'll put this on. And it was a really strong album. There's a lot of great songs on this. Where am I at here? Sorry, I've been. There's a wonderful album, a song called Quartz, Fruit of the Wild Rose, which they don't perform live that often, but it's an amazing song. This is the 21st Century. There's some of their best material is on this album. It gets a little forgotten, a little bit maybe because of what the next album was, but that sparked my interest in the band again. It reignited it. So for their next album, Marbles, that they were doing the same thing, and they had a little bit more of an expanded campaign, and there was wound up being a few different special editions, but there was like a 1-disc version of the album, but there was also a 2-disc longer version of the album that I got. That was their next album, Marbles, and again, I apologize if it seems like I'm throwing around this term lightly. Again, another masterpiece. This is just an amazing album all the way through. They actually tried a little bit of an experiment, and they got away with it. They figured, okay, if they would put out 3 different versions of the first single, which was "You're Gone," and 3 different versions with different B-sides on each, or extra tracks. And this was said to the fan base, "Hey, look, if everybody in the fan club list buys these 3 different versions, and they made it worth their while, different extra tracks on it, if you all buy them, I'm betting we could get this song into the top 10," and it worked. They made the top 10 of the charts. I think they made it to number 7 with the "You're Gone" single, which came to the shock of a lot of people in the British music press were kind of dismissive of them, and it's like, oh, wait, is this band still together? The album as a whole is amazing. There's some wonderful epic tracks on it. It starts off with "Invisible Man." There's this amazing piece called "Ocean Cloud," and it closes off with "Neverland," which is possibly my favorite Marillion song. It's this amazing emotional outpouring. Again, after Brave, possibly before Brave, because this is it's a bit more song based. But if I'd be saying this to people, want to check out one Marillion album, well, check out Marbles, which is a lot because it's a 2-disc album. Even in streaming, it's go to a streaming source. It's a long album if you want to take it all in, and you should, because that's the way it should be heard. Because I'm very old. So that was Marbles. That really brought them back into a bit, I don't know, right into the forefront, but kind of revitalized them after some time and a bit in the wilderness. The next 2 albums on there that they came out with, let's see here, Somewhere Else and Happiness is the Road, and I've got one of those 2 here. So this is Happiness is the Road. It's a 2-disc version, and it's there were very strong follow-ups. Initially, I thought Somewhere Else was maybe a little bit more like Holidays in Eden, the second one after Season's End. I was like, okay, here had the great album, and then it's like, okay, not as strong, but actually there's a lot of really powerful songs on that. I'll it took me a bit longer to get into it, but I'll sign off on that as if not one of the great albums, it's a really good album. Happiness is the Road is also very very strong. And this is where I kind of got in with the this is this was the first pre-order I got, and I'll get to why it's kind of special to me a bit later. But yeah, it's as you can see, it's like this very fancy version in the thick box. Now, just trying to think. Oh yeah, okay. It's a bit after that I got to get to see them live a few more times. They would be doing what was called. They would already be doing it a fair number of times at this point. Called the Marillion weekends. It started in Britain, but they've expanded it to more international versions. It was 3-day weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. They would in some places it'd be more convention-ish, but band would perform 3 shows, and there'd be completely separate set lists, and then sometimes they do like sort of thematic things of different ways of presenting the songs. I know one time, well, sometimes they'll do, or actually fairly regularly at this point, they'll do like an album set. Like, we're going to perform this album beginning to end live, and they'll do some B-sides and then a few other tracks after that. One kind of, when I was mentioning the sort of thematic nights, one was the Saturday night would be the Saturday night, so it's like up tempo and like a lot of really sort of kind of real rocking, really really get your blood pumping type of set. And the Sunday night set was a little more chill. It was more atmospheric because it's it's Sunday. It's going to sort of relax to close out the weekend. They had one that was sort of one time they did like, we're going backwards through the history of the band and standout songs, just going. That's how the set list would work. And then the next list was where they took all of the really long epic songs that they could and just put them all into one night. They came out on a live album called Size Matters. And yeah, so initially, as I said, it was just in England, and then they did like England and Holland, and then they started doing England and Holland and Montreal. And I don't think I was at the first Montreal one, but I went to 3 different Montreal ones. So that's how my that's how my number of Marillion shows. I'm in Ottawa. They don't really play Ottawa that I don't know. They played them as that Barrymore show that I saw them at. But I haven't got any back when I could travel a little more. I can't really get out as much, outside Ottawa right now. But I did go to 3 of the Montreal weekends. So it was like, as I said, there's the 2-night right at the beginning of the Season's End tour, right at the beginning of the Steve Hogarth era, Season's End tour. I saw them twice at Barrymore's. I saw them one more time in an individual show. I'm kind of counting this. They called it Los Trios Marillios in Montreal. It wasn't the full band. It was lead singer, bass player, and guitar player. And haven't mentioned this before, Steve Hogarth is a singer, but he also plays keyboards and a bit of guitar. So it was like a semi-acoustic type presentation. I count that as that. And then that was the 3rd time I saw them. And then there's 3 Marillion weekends. So 3 weekends of 3 shows each. So nine shows, bringing the total up to 12. So that's when I got to see them a bit after, I believe it was after Somewhere Else came out. The next 2 out, let me see, sorry, losing my place in my notes. The next 2 albums were Sounds That Can't Be Made and FEAR. I'll let you look up what it stands for. I consider these 2 to be full-on masterpieces. These are amazing albums. I'm so impressed that this band, so deep into their career, still is able to put albums that I will say this is the best music. This is among the best music they've ever made, and get a lot of repeat play for them. The songwriting remains very, very powerful. One thing that has not changed. It's not just kind of, like I like King Crimson, and where they'll be based on a lot of improvisation. Is these, not so much the end result from this, although I gather that's part of the, jamming is part of the songwriting process, but these are very well constructed songs, and it shows on these two albums. There's a couple of little albums, that in this mix here, they're sort of, I don't know, kind of like side albums, but they're still really good. There's one called, what is it called again? Less is More, which is not full on unplugged, but kind of sort of semi-acoustic. They sort of stripped down the arrangements of some of their older material, and kind of going the opposite direction. There was another album called with some friends from the orchestra, which is not a full orchestral backing, but I believe the name of the there's a string quartet. I believe it was called In Praise of Folly, as a string quartet plus a flautist and a French horn player, and having this sort of mini orchestra, or whatever you call a 6-piece orchestra, adding to it, and it really changed changed a lot of the sounds of this. Even though it's kind of reinterpretation of older material, I think they do stand up as valid. Valid works on their own. I enjoy listening to those albums for their own reasons, and I don't feel they're a rehash. I find there's enough innovation and just good unique ideas on their own, even though it's some of the older previously done songs. The last album so far, it might be their final album. I don't know. I there's a bit of an interview I saw with Steve Hogarth, who was kind of mentioning, we might not have that many albums left, and like, that kind of saddens me. But this is a band that's been in operation for like 40 plus years. So maybe that's thinking of like, this is winding down their career. But this is it. It's An Hour Before It's Dark. This is the other kind of special edition I have. Now, I do have the special editions of FEAR and Sounds That Can't Be Made. I'm not going to show them to you. I found those later. They were in a record store. I was like, oh, cool, get them. But it cost a little bit of money, but I did not get them at the time. I like these ones particularly because there's something very special in it. When you pre-order these special editions, I said, if you pre-order the really special edition, we'll put your name in the credits. And I was like, there's a big long section. I'm not going to show it to you, but it's in there. But they come with these, I'll show a little bit. It's like, has this sort of thick book in the middle of this. And here, I'll show this. I won't show you mine particularly. But all the people who pre-ordered it got their names in. So there's a bunch of people out there who've got these, have something with my name in it. So that's my one little bit of immortality that I've managed to achieve. I've got my name in a limited edition of a Marillion album. Woohoo. I'm gonna live forever. I've been going on for a while. It's heading towards an hour. It's nearly 50 minutes at least. But I do want to try and talk. Why do I love this band? There's a lot of reasons. As I say, it speaks to my heart. The music's beautiful. It's powerful. They're all amazing musicians. Steve Rothery is this beautiful. It's more of a tone than a flash. And not that I don't enjoy some more dazzling virtuoso players, but it's more about the sound. It's a very David Gilmour like sound. Not to be mistaken for David Gilmour, but it's just like that tone. It's a beautiful, heartbreaking, just the timbre of that specific voice of that, which you could also say about the singers. Both Steve Hogarth and Fish have just this wonderful timbre to their voices as well. Peter Trewavas, every time I listen to the bass, is doing something interesting. Ian Mosley and Mark Kelly sort of just kind of, and the rest of them, but they're first-class musicians. But one thing I was trying to explain to people is, yes, they're kind of oh yeah, they're a neo progressive rock band or kind of put in that, but I feel that they're a truly progressive a band. Go if you listen to their albums from beginning to end, you can say there's an evolution in place. Um, and if I say, for example, Yes, who are one of my favorite bands, we'll get to them in time. I love them, but if I oh here's a new Yes album, well, I think I'm probably gonna have a fairly decent, or even new to me. Okay, when did it come out? Okay, I think I'll have a fairly decent idea what it's gonna sound like. Um, Marillion, I think of along the lines of say Rush or King Crimson. I was like, okay, well here's the next album from this coming out. I might not know that. I might not know exactly what they're going to be presenting to me. It's continuing shaping. They're not just you say, oh yeah, okay, well they sound like Genesis or they sound like Yes or Pink Floyd. It's like, well no, you listen as it goes along and hear echoes of Muse. You'll hear echoes of maybe Radiohead or Elbow or some more modern bands coming in. There's a live album that they did. From one of the weekends where they did a fair number of B-sides and deep album cuts and a number of covers, and they covered a song by Keane, and they did it was in Holland, so they did Hocus Pocus by Focus, which is a hugely fun track. They covered Money 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 by ABBA. They did this amazing cover of Toxic by Britney Spears. It's like it's not just in this stuck in this sort of progressive rock bubble. They like drawing it which I don't think is much of a bubble at all. I mean, there's a lot of great different sounds coming at it, but they're pulling in things from a lot of different sources, and that's how I find they stay fresh and vital. And I hope we can get at least at least a couple more albums, guys. Please. And one thing that I'm gonna say. Marillion I would consider be fourth in of the bands that I listen to as far as most number of live albums of theirs that I own. The big three, particularly with regards to archival material, but studio and live, but definitely with live albums, it would be Grateful Dead, Frank Zappa, King Crimson. I think I mentioned that on the King Crimson one, but I would probably put Marillion at a comfortable fourth. Unlike those particular bands, they're not really, it's not a lot of improvisation or jamming that's going to be it. Apart from, I mentioned those sort of two little side projects of, there's some live albums associated with the less is more semi-acoustic presentation, and with some friends from the orchestra, semi-orchestral presentation, but mostly it's not a huge difference between the individual songs as they are on the studio to which as they are live. There's a few notable variations, but it's not really what they're based on. But somehow for me, it does have significance. I mean, there's enough reason. It's not okay. Here's another live album that I'm going to put next to my other live albums and throw it on the pile. It's somehow the context, with the change of context. This particular song is part of this particular set list from the tour. I mean, it might not change that much during the tour, but the set list on this tour it'll be different from the set list on a different tour. And if I hear the album or part of the song in that context, it's a different story for me than hearing it as part of a different show from a different era. A lot of these sort of theme nights that I've mentioned before with the Marillion weekend, those they can make their own kind of unique trips. It's like that's a whole kind of new different picture than say hearing it in the context of, like I say, a different show or different tour. I think I'm kind of looping back on myself, but even though it's not quite going to be the same as I say these other artists that I like, where it's like that's a whole new like it's not like Grateful Dead with we hear One Dark Star, it's a whole different thing from another different Dark Star. but it's yeah, I have my own particular favorite live albums. There's a lot of live videos too, which is great because they do, you know, Steve Hogarth is a great, like I say, got a great stage personality. You know, there's a few videos from the Fish era, and they're definitely worth seeing for that as well, because Fish is a very special performer. So here we are wrapping this up, just short of an hour. Fish and Steve Hogarth era Marillion. Least cool band in the world, possibly, but in my view, the greatest, or at least my favorite. So if you want to go check them out, there are lots of great videos online and in YouTube. Yeah, take a chance with these guys. I think there's something really special. So we're going to close this up. Thank you for staying along for this quite long trip. Next time will be a letter N. And I'll see you hopefully pretty soon. Bye-bye.